The testing chamber hummed with that peculiar frequency that made my sensory stalks itch. I stood behind the observation panel, all four of my eyes fixed on the human specimen below. His name was Marcus Webb, according to the data slate clutched in my primary manipulator. Another human, another supposedly average example of their species, another routine compliance assessment. I should mention that I am Vrell, Senior Examination Coordinator for the Galactic Confederation's Newcomer Integration Program. 17 cycles I have spent evaluating candidates from newly contacted worlds. 17 cycles of watching species after species crumble before challenges that any proper civilized being would handle with minimal effort. The humans had been petitioning for full Confederation membership for 3 standard rotations now, and frankly most of us in the department were getting tired of their constant applications. Subject ready for cognitive stress evaluation, chirped my assistant Plix, her translator rendering her clicks into flat, emotionless standard speech. She was a Quilmarian, all chitinous efficiency and 0 personality, perfect for bureaucratic work, absolutely dreadful at office parties. Marcus Webb stood in the center of the chamber, wearing the standard neural interface crown that would link him to our simulation systems. He looked bored, on his arms crossed, weight shifted onto one leg, examining his fingernails like he was waiting for public transportation, rather than facing an examination that would determine his entire species' political future. The audacity was almost refreshing. Initiating sequence 1, Plix announced, her voice carrying that particular tone that suggested she had already filed him under failure in her mental records. The chamber walls shimmered, and the scenario began. Standard protocol: place the subject in an impossible tactical situation, measure their panic response, evaluate their decision-making under existential pressure, document their inevitable psychological collapse. We had run this same test on 462 species. 462 species had failed in various spectacular and sometimes unfortunate ways. The simulation materialized around Marcus. He now stood on the command deck of a colony ship. Alerts, screaming crew members shouting conflicting reports. The scenario was simple, cruelly so. Hostile forces approaching from 3 vectors, shields at 40%, weapons systems damaged, 2,000 civilians in the lower decks including families and children, and exactly 4 minutes to make a decision that would either save some people or doom everyone. Most species froze, some wept. The Corthians had actually tried to bargain with the simulation itself, offering trade agreements to the fictional enemy ships. That had been awkward to watch. Marcus Webb yawned. Actually yawned. "Is this thing working?" he asked, tapping the neural crown with one finger. "Because I am getting some serious low-budget theater vibes here." I felt my secondary heart skip a beat. Nobody talked during the simulations. The neural interface was supposed to create total immersion, complete suspension of disbelief, overwhelming sensory input that made the scenario feel absolutely real. We had Telmorian engineers design these systems, and Telmorians did not do things halfway. Their species had 400 words for precision and none for close enough. "Simulation integrity at maximum," Plix reported, mandibles clicking with confusion. "Neural engagement confirmed. He should be experiencing full sensory incorporation." "Yeah, I am getting all the inputs," Marcus called out, apparently able to hear us despite the supposedly soundproof observation barriers. "It just isn't very convincing. Is that supposed to be a Kravix battlecruiser? Because the hull configuration is wrong. They mount their primary cannons on dorsal emplacements, not ventral, and their shield frequency cycles every 7 seconds, not continuously. Did anyone on your team actually research this, or did you just throw together whatever looked scary?" My tertiary stomach chose that moment to remind me that I had skipped second breakfast. This was not going according to protocol at all. "Perhaps the subject requires additional stress parameters," I muttered, adjusting the difficulty settings. "Plix, increase threat assessment to level 6. The simulation shifted. Now the enemy ships multiplied. Systems failed faster. The crew members started suffering injuries. We added a radiation leak for good measure. The whole scenario became objectively unsolvable, a nightmare cascade of catastrophic failures with no possible positive outcome. We generally reserved level 6 for species who passed the initial stages. We definitely never used it in first contact assessments. Marcus looked around, scratched his chin, and then walked directly through the holographic command console to examine the tactical display more closely. Okay, so you want me to panic now? Is that the point? Because I have got to tell you, this whole thing feels like one of those training scenarios the military uses to teach officers that sometimes you just have to accept casualties and live with your choices. He paused, glancing up at where he apparently assumed we were watching from. Spoiler alert, I am terrible at accepting things I do not like. Then Marcus Webb did something I had never seen in 17 cycles of testing. He smiled. Not a nervous smile or a fearful smile. The smile of someone who just figured out the punchline to a joke nobody else had heard yet. Computer, he said, addressing the simulation's control systems directly. Access command override web-7-2-alpha. Authorization code. They never learn. The simulation stuttered. Not froze, not crashed, but actually stuttered like a recording device hitting a damaged section. Plix made a sound I had never heard a Quilmarian make before, sort of a strangled chirp mixed with the noise of dropping something fragile. How did he? She started. Silence, I hissed. All four eyes now locked on the human below. Let him continue. Marcus had somehow accessed the simulation's underlying control architecture, through the neural interface, using verbal commands that should not have worked because the interface only read thoughts and emotional responses, not processed speech recognition. The Telmorians were going to have some strongly worded communications coming their way about their flawless design specifications. See, the thing about impossible scenarios, Marcus continued, now apparently lecturing both us and the frozen simulation, is that they are only impossible if you accept the parameters you have been given. Someone programmed this test. Someone decided these would be the variables. Someone chose to make this unsolvable. He started manipulating the holographic controls, fingers dancing through light-based interfaces with surprising confidence. Which means someone also left back doors in the code, because programmers always do. It is kind of their thing. They cannot help themselves. They build in access routes, and override commands, and secret testing protocols because they might need them later. The simulation reformed around him. But now it was different. The enemy ships were still there, but Marcus had somehow redistributed the colony ships' power systems. He had re-reported life support to boost shields, shut down non-essential sections to free up processing capacity for weapons targeting, and plotted a vector that would take the ship through a hazardous asteroid field that did not exist in the original scenario parameters. Plix, is he actually editing the test while taking the test? I asked. Affirmative. Somehow, the Telmorians are going to have collective aneurysms when they see this data log. Marcus was not finished. He started adding elements to the scenario that we had never programmed. An abandoned mining station that could provide cover. A magnetic anomaly that would interfere with enemy targeting systems. A distress signal that would summon neutral trading vessels to the area, forcing the hostile forces to either back off or risk starting a wider conflict. He is building himself a way out, Plix whispered, or creeping into her translator's output. He is actually solving the unsolvable scenario by changing the scenario itself. The simulated battle played out with Marcus's modifications. His colony ship limped through the asteroid field, shields buckling but holding. The enemy ships, now faced with unexpected complications and potential witnesses, broke off their attack. The civilians were saved. The ship survived. Marcus Webb stood in the middle of his modified simulation, looking pleased with himself. How was that? He asked. The empty air. Do I pass? I reached over and terminated the simulation. The chamber returned to its blank, neutral state, leaving Marcus standing alone in the empty space, still wearing the neural crown. Subject Webb, I announced through the communication systems. You have failed the examination. His eyebrows rose, just slightly. Have I now? The parameters were clear. You were meant to work within the scenario provided, not reprogram it to your specifications. You demonstrated technological interference with Confederation testing equipment. You showed flagrant disregard for established protocols. Your psychological profile indicates dangerous levels of creative problem-solving and an unwillingness to accept authority-determined limitations. Marcus removed the neural crown slowly, deliberately, his eyes scanning the walls until they fixed on what he apparently correctly guessed was our observation position. Let me see if I understand this correctly. You put me in a rigged test, a scenario designed to have no solution, specifically to see how I react to hopeless situations. And when I refuse to accept your version of hopeless, when I actually solve the problem you said could not be solved, you tell me I failed. That is correct, I confirmed. You failed to comply with testing standards. Compliance, Marcus repeated, tasting the word like something sour. Right, compliance. Because that is what the Galactic Confederation really wants. Species that know their place. Species that accept what they are told. Species that do not question the rules or think outside the boxes you put them in. He started walking toward the chamber exit, moving with that peculiar human confidence that I was beginning to understand was not arrogance, but rather a fundamental inability to accept defeat. Tell me something, Examiner Vrell. I felt my sensory stalks go rigid. He knew my name. He should not know my name. The observation booth was isolated, shielded, completely separate from the testing environment. If I failed so completely, if I am so dangerous and non-compliant and such a terrible candidate for Confederation membership, Marcus continued, his hand on the door release panel, then why are you still breathing? The question hung in the air like an unexploded munition. Excuse me? I managed. Marcus smiled again, but this time it was different, colder, more calculated. The smile of someone revealing cards they had been holding the entire game. Your testing chamber, full sensory immersion, you said. Neural interface, complete control over what the subject experiences. You could have made me feel anything. Pain, terror, suffocation. You could have simulated my death 1,000 times in 1,000 ways to study human psychological breaking points. He tapped the neural crown he still held in one hand. This thing was in my head, connected to my brain, reading my thoughts, and you gave me access to your computer systems, even accidentally. I was inside your network for approximately 12 minutes. I could have overridden life support in this lacussely. I could have locked down your systems. I could have done a lot of things. The temperature in the observation booth suddenly felt several degrees colder. But I did not, Marcus continued, because unlike your little test, I do not actually believe in no-win scenarios. I do not think problems are better solved by eliminating the people who disagree with you. I think they are solved by being creative and persistent, and occasionally just stubborn enough to refuse to accept defeat. He opened the chamber door, paused in the threshold. So you can mark me as failed in whatever reports you file. You can tell your Confederation that humans do not meet your compliance standards. But before you do, maybe ask yourself this. Do you want members who know how to follow rules, or do you want allies who know how to win? The door closed behind him with a soft final click. Plix and I stared at each other across the observation booth. All four of my eyes were wide. Her mandibles hung slightly open. The data slate in my manipulator suddenly felt very, very heavy. Did he just, Plix started, threaten us while simultaneously proving he had exercised restraint in not actually threatening us? I finished. Yes, I believe he did. What do we do now? I looked down at the data slate, at the 17 cycles of testing protocols, at the 462 species we had evaluated and filed and categorized into our neat little Confederation hierarchies, at the rules that said Marcus Webb had failed because he did not comply with our expectations. Then I looked at the empty testing chamber where a single human had just rewritten our supposedly unbeatable scenario and walked out without breaking a sweat. Plix, I said slowly, I think we need to escalate this to the Council, immediately. And I think we need to recommend they meet with the human delegation again. Soon. Were we going to tell them the human past? I set down the data slate and began drafting my report, choosing my words very carefully. I am going to tell them that the human demonstrated capabilities that require immediate council attention. I am going to tell them that humanity's integration into the Confederation is not a matter of whether they meet our standards. I am going to tell them it is a matter of whether we can afford to have them outside the Confederation doing whatever they do. That sounds suspiciously like we are admitting they frighten us. Plix, I said, all 4 eyes on the screen as I typed. I have been doing this job for 17 cycles. I have seen species with plasma breath and species that can survive vacuum exposure and species with 17 different combat forms. Not one of them has ever scared me like that human just did. Because they were all dangerous in predictable ways. They followed their nature. They operated within expected parameters. I paused, re-watching the recording of Marcus casually reprogramming our simulation, while explaining exactly what he was doing and why it worked. Marcus Webb looked at an impossible situation, refused to accept it was impossible, hacked our systems, solved the problem anyway, and then gave us a lecture on creative problem solving, while making it completely clear he could have hurt us but chose not to. That is not dangerous in a way our rules account for. That is dangerous in an entirely new category. What category is that? I finished typing and flagged the report as urgent priority. The category where you really want them on your side when things go wrong. Because they will not accept defeat. They will not comply with failure. They will just keep finding ways to win until reality itself gives up and lets them. Plix made that strangled chirping sound again. The council is not going to like this. The council, I replied, is going to have to decide whether they like having humans as members or having humans as competition. Because after watching Marcus Webb turn our testing protocols into a joke, I am fairly certain that humanity is not going to stop advancing, innovating, or causing trouble just because we told them they failed our test. The communication console chimed. A message from the council chamber, requesting immediate clarification on why I had just submitted an urgent report, flagged with threat assessment codes, typically reserved for extinction-level events. I looked at Plix. She looked at me. Somewhere in the facility Marcus Webb was probably finding more of our systems to casually demonstrate he could access if he wanted to. Well, I said, reaching for the communication controls, this is going to be an interesting conversation. The council chamber was exactly as uncomfortable as I remembered. Too bright, too cold and filled with beings who had spent centuries perfecting the art of making other species feel insignificant. 17 different civilizations represented in one circular room, each delegate perched, seated or otherwise positioned at their species-appropriate stations. And all of them were staring at me like I had just announced the cafeteria was serving poison for lunch. High Chancellor Morvax spoke first, his triple-jointed neck allowing his head to swivel in that unsettling way that Yuldorians considered polite attention. Examiner Vrell, your report makes some rather extraordinary claims about the human test subject. Perhaps you would care to explain why you believe a single failed candidate warrants emergency council proceedings. I activated my data slate, projecting Marcus Webb's testing session into the holographic display at the chamber's center. With respect, High Chancellor, I do not believe Marcus Webb failed our test. I believe our test failed to evaluate Marcus Webb. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Councillor Thex, a Grindarian, whose species communicated primarily through color shifts in their bioluminescent skin, flickered an aggressive shade of orange. Semantic games. Examiner. The human deviated from protocol. He manipulated Confederation technology without authorization. These are clear violations. He survived, I countered, letting the recording play. More than survived. He identified the parameters of an unsolvable scenario, recognized it as artificial, accessed systems he should not have been able to access, modified variables in real time, and created a solution where none existed, all while maintaining enough situational awareness to understand exactly what he was doing and why. The recording showed Marcus casually editing the simulation, his fingers moving through holographic controls like he had been using Telmorian interfaces his entire life. Several council members leaned forward. A few leaned back. Furthermore, I continued, He had unrestricted access to our facility networks for approximately 12 minutes. He could have caused significant damage. He chose not to. When I informed him he had failed, he made it exceptionally clear that his restraint was a choice, not an inability. I played the final exchange, Marcus's words echoing through the council chamber. If I failed so completely, then why are you still breathing? The silence that followed was the kind you could cut with a blade and serve for dinner. High Chancellor Morvax's skin tone shifted to a pale grey, which I had learned indicated deep thought or severe indigestion. With Yildorians it was often hard to tell the difference. This is your emergency? That a human made an implied threat after failing our examination? No, High Chancellor. My emergency is that the human demonstrated capabilities that exceed our ability to test, made his threat so subtle, we almost missed it and then walked away, leaving us to figure out whether we should be grateful for his mercy or terrified of his potential. He did not just beat our test. He made us realize our test was inadequate. Councillor Thex flickered red. You are suggesting we lower our standards because one species showed basic problem-solving skills? I am suggesting, I said, keeping my voice level, that we reconsider what our standards actually measure. We test for compliance, obedience, and psychological breaking points. Marcus Webb demonstrated innovation, adaptability, and self-restraint. Which qualities does the Confederation actually need in its members? We need species who follow the rules, snapped Delegate Voran, a Calexian whose entire species had built their civilization on rigid hierarchical structures. Order, predictability, respect for established systems. Then perhaps, a new voice interjected, you should stop inviting humans to take tests designed to see how we handle chaos. Every head, sensor cluster, and optical organ in the chamber swiveled toward the entrance. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway, flanked by two very nervous-looking security officers who clearly had no idea how he had gotten past 3 checkpoints and 2 biometric scanners to reach the restricted council level. High Chancellor Morvax rose to his full height, which was considerable and meant to be intimidating. This is a closed session. Security, remove this. Save it, Marcus interrupted, walking into the chamber like he owned the place. The security officers looked at each other, then at me, then apparently decided this was above their pay grade, and stayed near the door. I am Marcus Webb, the human who supposedly failed your test, and I have a few questions about your evaluation criteria. You have no right to address this council, Vaughan sputtered. Actually, according to Confederation Charter Section 47, Subsection 12, any individual whose evaluation results directly impact species integration status has the right to petition for review within 72 standard hours of testing completion. Marcus pulled out his own data slate, centuries-old Confederation law glowing on its screen. It has been 4 hours. I am well within my window. So unless you have updated your charter recently, and I checked this morning so I know you have not, I have every right to be here. The silence this time had a different quality. The silence of people realizing they had severely underestimated someone. Councillor Thex flickered a confused purple. How did you access our legal databases? Same way I accessed your testing systems. You have decent security for keeping out aggressive infiltration, but your passive monitoring is weak. Anyone looking like they belong, moving with confidence and carrying proper credentials can get surprisingly far. Oh, and your credentials? Marcus held up an official-looking badge that absolutely had not been issued to him. Your fabrication systems are embarrassingly easy to spoof. I made this in my quarters using a standard matter printer and your own security templates. He tossed the badge to the nearest security officer, who caught it reflexively and then stared at it like it might explode. Do not worry, it will dissolve in about 15 minutes. I did not want to cause permanent damage to your systems, just wanted to make a point. And what point is that? I asked, genuinely curious now. Marcus turned to face the full council, and I saw something in his expression that I had not noticed during the test. Not arrogance, not bravado, something more like disappointment mixed with determination. My point is that you are testing for the wrong things. You put species through impossible scenarios to see when they break. You measure compliance and obedience and how well they follow your rules, but you are not asking the important question. Which is? High Chancellor Morvax inquired, his tone suggesting this had better be good. Which is, what happens when the rules do not work anymore? Marcus gestured around the chamber. How old is this confederation? 4,000 years? 5? In all that time, how many genuine existential threats have you faced? How many times has something come along that did not fit your protocols and procedures and carefully maintained hierarchies? The council members exchanged glances. None of them spoke, which was answer enough. That is what I thought, Marcus continued. You have gotten comfortable, built systems that work great for managing peace and prosperity, created tests that measure how well species fit into those systems. But systems only work until they do not. Protocols only help until you face something they were not designed for. And rules only matter until you meet someone who plays by different ones. He activated his own data slate, projecting images into the chamber's holographic display, star charts, sensor readings, data I did not recognize but that made several council members stiffen in their seats. We have been watching you same as you have been watching us. We know about the dead zone in Sector 7. We know about the automated defense network that stopped responding to commands 16 cycles ago. We know about the colony ships that disappeared near the Vorten expanse. We know about the signals coming from dark space that your linguists cannot translate. Delegate Voren made a choking sound. That information is classified at the highest levels. How did I access it? Marcus smiled that cold smile again. Because your security measures assume threats will look like threats, act like threats, follow some kind of logical attack pattern. But humans, we are curious. We poke things. We look at systems and think, I wonder what would happen if I tried this. We do not do it to be malicious. We do it because we cannot help ourselves. It is how we are wired. He pulled up more data, showing what appeared to be human analysis of Confederation defensive capabilities. You have 17 member species, impressive fleets, advanced technology, but you have all been at peace so long that your militaries are more ceremonial than functional. Your weapon systems are 3 generations behind what you could be building. Your strategic planning assumes enemies will announce themselves and engage according to accepted combat doctrines. You speak as if you expect conflict, Morvax observed quietly. I expect reality, Marcus replied. And reality does not care about your expectations. Something is out there in the dead zone, something that does not follow your rules. Something that your comfortable, predictable systems are not prepared to handle. And when it comes, not if, but when, you are going to need allies who know how to handle the impossible. Who do not shut down when the scenarios stop making sense, who can look at unsolvable problems and solve them anyway. He turned specifically toward me. Examiner Vrell judged me harshly for not following protocol, for hacking your test instead of failing gracefully. But here is the thing about humans. We do not fail gracefully. We fail loudly, messily, and usually while trying 17 different things that probably will not work, but might just possibly succeed, and 1 in 17 ain't bad odds when the alternative is giving up. Thex flickered an uncertain yellow. You are suggesting we accept humanity into the Confederation, because you are unpredictable. I am suggesting you accept humanity because we are adaptable, creative, and too stubborn to know when we are beaten. Marcus walked slowly around the chamber, making eye contact with each council member in turn. You put me in a test designed to break me. I broke your test instead. That should terrify you. But it should also tell you something important. When things go wrong, when the galaxy throws something at you that does not fit your expectations, we are the species you want on your side. Or the species we should be most concerned about, Vaughn muttered. Maybe both, Marcus acknowledged. We are complicated like that. But ask yourselves this. In 4,000 years of Confederation history, how many times has a candidate done what I did, hacked your systems, solved your unsolvable test, and then showed up here to argue their case using your own laws? The silence suggested the answer was 0. Humans do not fit your boxes, Marcus continued. We are going to cause problems, break things, question authority, push boundaries. We are going to be annoying and difficult and probably give you all chronic digestive issues from stress. But we are also going to be here, contributing, innovating, and helping you deal with whatever comes next. Because that is what we do. We survive, we adapt, we overcome. He stopped in the center of the chamber, right where his holographic test recording had played earlier. So here is my proposal. You can reject humanity's application. Tell us we failed your test. Keep us out of the Confederation, because we do not meet your compliance standards. And when something comes along that does care about your standards, you can handle it yourselves. Good luck with that. Or, High Chancellor Morvax prompted. Or you can accept that humanity is a different kind of species. We are going to do things differently. We are going to challenge your assumptions. We are going to make you uncomfortable. But we are also going to be the allies who show up when everyone else has given up. The ones who look at impossible odds and say, yeah, but have you tried this? The ones who refuse to accept defeat even when defeat seems like the only logical option. Marcus met Morvax's gaze directly, neither backing down nor escalating. You test for obedience. We offer partnership. You measure compliance. We provide innovation. You want species who fit your systems. We want to help you build better systems. The question is, which do you actually need? The council chamber remained silent for a long moment. I watched as decades of established protocol collided with uncomfortable reality. These were beings who had spent their entire careers managing stability, and Marcus Webb was offering them chaos with a side of survival. Finally, High Chancellor Morvax settled back into his seat. Mr. Webb, your presence here, while technically legal, is highly irregular. Your arguments are provocative, and your demonstration of our security weaknesses is both alarming and, I must admit, somewhat impressive. I will take that as a compliment, Marcus said. It was not intended as one, but Morvax's tone suggested otherwise. However, you have raised points that merit consideration. The Council will deliberate on humanity's application status. You will be informed of our decision through proper channels. How long? Marcus asked. These matters take time. Proper evaluation requires. How long? Marcus repeated. Because I can tell you exactly how long until the dead zone anomaly reaches your core systems. 14 cycles. Maybe 15 if you are lucky. Your analysts know this. They have been tracking it, and they have been very carefully not mentioning it in official reports, because acknowledging it means acknowledging you do not have a solution. Every council member suddenly looked very interested in their data slates, or the ceiling, or anywhere, except at Marcus. I thought so, Marcus said softly. Look, I am not trying to blackmail you or force your hand, but I am trying to save time we do not have. Humanity can help. We are good at solving problems that should not have solutions, but we cannot help if we are kept at arm's length, because we do not bow properly, or follow your testing protocols. He started walking toward the exit, pausing at the doorway. Examiner Vrell filed his report saying I failed your test. Technically he was right. I did not do what you wanted, but I did do what you needed. I survived. I adapted. I won. Those are the qualities you are going to need in the cycles ahead. So make your decision, but make it soon, because ready or not, reality is coming, and it does not care about your protocols. Then Marcus Webb walked out of the council chamber, leaving behind 17 very thoughtful aliens and one examiner who was pretty sure he had just witnessed something historic. High Chancellor Morvax turned to me slowly. Examiner Vrell, your professional opinion. Is the human exaggerating our security vulnerabilities? I thought about Marcus accessing our systems, forging credentials, reaching restricted levels, and apparently knowing about classified threats that most council members only discussed in encrypted sessions. No, High Chancellor, if anything I suspect he is understating them to avoid causing panic, and his claims about the dead zone anomaly timeline. I pulled up the classified reports I probably was not supposed to have access to, but had acquired after Marcus made me paranoid about our information security. The timeline matches our most pessimistic projections, possibly optimistic depending on the anomaly's acceleration curve. Morvex made a sound that was either a laugh or a groan. So we have a species that does not follow our rules, refuses to accept our judgments, hacks our systems, knows our secrets, and wants us to trust them with Confederation membership. Does that sum it up? Yes, High Chancellor. And your recommendation? I looked at the empty doorway where Marcus had stood, remembering his smile when he solved the unsolvable test. Remembering his restraint when he could have caused real damage. Remembering his frustration at being judged by standards that missed the point entirely. My recommendation is that we stop testing humanity by our standards and start evaluating them by their results. Marcus Webb demonstrated more useful capabilities in one afternoon than most species show in their entire application process. He is chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely refuses to do things the proper way. He is also exactly what we need. That is not a proper recommendation format, Delegate Voren complained. No, I agreed. It is not. But then nothing about humanity is going to be proper by our standards. The question is whether we can adapt to them as effectively as they adapt to everything else. Councillor Thex flickered a thoughtful green. The human mentioned we have 14 cycles before the dead zone situation becomes critical. If we accept humanity's application, what guarantee do we have they can actually help? None, I admitted. But we also have no guarantee our current approaches will work. At least with humanity, we get allies who specialize in impossible problems. And who knows? Maybe their chaos is exactly what we need to shake up our comfortable systems before something else does it for us. High Chancellor Morvax stood, signaling the session was ending. The Council will deliberate. Examiner Vrell, prepare a comprehensive analysis of human capabilities, security implications, and integration recommendations. Include both conventional evaluation metrics and unconventional assessments of their demonstrated abilities. Including the parts where Marcus Webb made our security look ridiculous? I asked. Especially those parts. If we are going to work with humans, we need to understand what we are actually dealing with. Morvex paused at his chamber exit. And Vrell, your original assessment was correct. Marcus Webb did fail our test. But I suspect our test failed him far more significantly. Draft new evaluation protocols that account for species who refuse to lose. We may need them. I left the council chamber feeling like I had just witnessed the Confederation take its first uncertain steps towards something new, something uncomfortable, something necessary. My communicator chimed. A message from Plix. Human delegation is celebrating in their quarters. Apparently someone accessed the council session recordings and shared them with the entire human team. They are very pleased with how things went. Also, they sent you a gift basket. Security scanned it. It contains fruit, chocolate and a data chip labeled Better Security Protocols, with love from Earth. Should I be concerned? I laughed, which startled several passing officials in the corridor. No, Plix. I think we should be grateful, and maybe actually read what is on that data chip. Something tells me humanity is going to keep surprising us whether we want them to or not. Are they joining the Confederation? I thought about Marcus Webb's smile. His refusal to accept defeat, his mixture of capability and restraint. Yes, the Council does not know it yet. But yet, because the alternative is facing the unknown without the one species crazy enough to think impossible problems are just puzzles waiting to be solved. That is not very scientific reasoning. No, I agreed, heading back to my office to begin drafting recommendations that would probably give the entire evaluation department collective anxiety. But then, something tells me working with humans is going to require more faith and less formula. And you know what, after 17 cycles of testing species by the same old standards, maybe that is exactly what we need. Somewhere in the facility, Marcus Webb was probably already finding new systems to explore and new protocols to challenge. And somehow I found that thought more reassuring than alarming. The galaxy was changing, humanity was coming. And reality was about to discover that humans had a very particular relationship with impossible situations. They refused to believe in them.